put people back at the heart of what we do. So let's build with humans, let's lead with humans, let's design for humans, and let's prioritize human connection. I think that's really important.
Yes. And for listeners, what's one thing that they can do to make the online world just a little bit kinder?
Do something that makes things better. So some examples: you can be kind in your comments. Consider how someone else might feel, including the content creator. Lift other people up, share other people's content, tell someone that what they've done is brilliant. Write a supportive message, thank somebody, leave a recommendation, leave a nice review.
Welcome to this week's episode of Akoni Tech Talks. We are joined by Serena today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be with you.
Yes, and we've got a lot to unpack today, because today we're diving into the human touch and why empathy still matters in the digital space. So, Serena, obviously technology connects us faster than ever before, but why are people feeling lonelier and more disconnected when we have the online space?
That's a great question. And yeah, we've heard a lot about the impact of loneliness, especially in the context of the digital age. I think there's a couple of things if we take a step back a bit and think about the fact that the online world isn't what we started with or what we were promised. I think that's the big thing for me. It feels like a shouty marketplace at the moment. And I think for me, there's a few things in that. I think ultimately we're flooded with a quantity of content rather than the quality of community. And I think that's really at the heart of the issue. You think about how interactions are more superficial on social media and online it can be harder for us to understand meaning, and so there's misunderstandings, and then the algorithms show us what we want to understand, what it thinks we want rather than what we might actually need. And then we think, broadly in terms of loneliness offline, we're seeing that disconnect with third spaces, which are places that aren't home or work. We're seeing that erosion of those as well. So I think the whole thing's compounding, and it's not great really, is it?
No, absolutely. And you kind of talked about the algorithms there and the feeling of it feeling like a shouty marketplace, but we are driven by this sort of digital first world. And I mean, do you think empathy can survive that, or are we, outsourcing too much of our human interaction to those algorithms?
Yeah, I think ultimately it can. It has to, because we're still human. I think that's the thing. And in fact, I think we're going to be craving authentic human connection even more in a world of AI chatbots, deep fakes, misinformation, and all that tech noise. You want to get to where the people are. So when we think about tech spaces, it's going to be more important to design for community and authenticity. And then when we're using AI, there's all sorts of ways where we need to make sure we're not faking human interaction, and actually having people oversee digital work is going to become more and more important. So yeah, we can't have the bots. You go to a supermarket and there's an unexpected item in the banking area. Do you know what I mean? So it's going to be the same online, I think.
And that's the thing, even though there's that greater digital connectivity, as well as the trend of kind of loneliness, there's also, that online toxicity, because there is space for negative people to share, unfiltered views or trolling, online bullying. I mean, what kind of role does empathy play in those digital interactions, and what do you think's happening? Why is there an area that's sort of missing? There seems to be a bit of a disconnect.
Yeah, and I suppose in some ways it's the disconnect between a digital world that doesn't seem like what we wanted it to be. It seems angry, risky, and isolating. And so that vision, the first stage of online community back in the early 1970s, and where we've got to now, where it feels like we're monetizing attention, anger, and anxiety. So we seem to have designed spaces where people feel they're rewarded for engagement, even bad attention, and that people feel they can hide behind anonymity. And ultimately, that happens when we're building spaces, when we're not building relationships, we're just selling things. And we're scaling back trust and safety, and we're leaving users to moderate and manage for themselves. And I think that's one of the reasons why centralized social media is dying. But ultimately, it's the end of Web 2.0, basically. But
Yeah.
I think something better is coming. And perhaps it's a chance for us to put empathy back at the heart of how we design and how we build community. That's my vision for the future.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was just about to say, are we as users responsible for this shift, or is it driven by how the platforms are designed? But, you're sort of saying that actually we are a big part of how the design is driven for these platforms.
Absolutely. And I think when we're thinking about the shift, that kind of weird toxicity sort of thing we were talking about, it's ultimately a shift from human connection to loneliness and toxicity and bots. I think users bear a little bit of responsibility for their behaviour and their choices. But I think it's mostly due to the people who own, design, and run our digital platforms. There's 3 different levels there. And ultimately, I think when you're looking at design and operation, they need to shape human experience and behaviour. So if people want to feel heard, they're going to jump through all those hoops to make it happen and all the available shortcuts. And that's why we end up with this augmentation of the noisy sort of trends and clickbaits and whatnot, because it's easy to follow the algorithm and it's easy to join in with the drama. But ultimately, it's better for us to be more mindful in our usage of tech.
Yes, yeah. And what's interesting is now, as you say, the kind of, even though we should be mindful of how things are, along comes artificial intelligence, AI, which kind of starts thinking for us, or mimicking those kind of human behaviors. I mean, so we come on to, can AI be empathetic? So, Serena, I'm keen to know, do you actually think AI will ever truly understand human emotions, or is empathy actually something that is unique to us as humans?
Yeah, I think the question is, can AI ever truly understand anything beyond
Mm,
programming, input and output?
yeah.
I asked ChatGPT, empathy bot, this question
Wow,
because I
okay.
thought let's crack it, shall we? Let's see what AI thinks of this question.
Mm,
It said it can only perform functional empathy.
yeah.
So it can recognize emotional patterns, it can respond empathetically, and it can even mirror emotional understanding, but it can't feel things.
Yeah.
So ultimately, AI is going to simulate empathy, but it doesn't have that lived human experience. So
Mm,
ultimately, it's an empathy copycat. And
yeah.
I think we're quite good as humans for spotting things that aren't quite right. It's going to feel wrong having an empathetic conversation with AI because it really matters, depending on the type of empathic communication you're looking for, kind of where you're getting it from. So,
Hmm.
for any work where human connection and understanding is really important, don't use a bot
Yeah.
because, why are we not using a human being for this work is the first question to ask. And if you're saying, oh, we're saving money, you're increasing risk at the same time. And so, yeah, ultimately,
Hmm.
no, it's not going to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. And as you say, so some companies are using AI driven activity, especially sentiment analysis and kind of like mental health chatbots is actually something we're seeing
Mm.
now as well. Do you think these help, or do they kind of risk giving a false sense of care?
I'm actually really concerned about
Hmm.
the rise of therapy bots and companion bots
Yeah.
because unfortunately we've seen quite a lot of stories, case studies coming out of the earlier uses of those tools, including some that have encouraged their users to end their own lives.
Mm.
There have been case studies. There was a non-profit that had an experimental bot that ended up giving people with eating disorders dieting advice, and young people who were tricked into thinking they're receiving emotional support from a person when the team were using bots to reply. So I think in the context of mental health and emotional support, if we think about the importance of trust and safe spaces, and then we think about the risk of getting it wrong and having no human oversight on those sensitive conversations, especially when people who may be vulnerable, they may be at risk of harm, it's really dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
And I think in that context, it's really hard to think of an appropriate use case for users to interact with a bot.
Yeah.
Maybe a website research tool, maybe, because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately I think empathic communication is human work.
Yeah. Where do you
Mm.
kind of see the limit of AI when it comes to that sort of thing, then creating, meaningful, empathetic online spaces? Where's the line with AI?
I think, like we were saying before, AI is designed to imitate. It's
Yeah.
designed to analyze and arguably to speculate.
Mm.
I use this phrase a lot. I've got no idea who originally said it, but AI is mansplaining as a service. It's great at confidently telling you something, but you're going to need to sense and fact check whether it's making stuff up or whether it's telling you the true stuff. So I think when we think about empathic spaces, they really
Mhm.
should be built and led by humans.
Yeah.
So a bot can help you. It can help you with screening, analysis, co-creation, curation even, but it's not going to be able to foster that empathic culture.
Hmm.
Because if you've ever tried telling AI a joke, or getting it to spot cultural nuance or context,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we need to leave the human work to the experts, really. So,
Definitely. That
yeah.
segues us nicely onto
Mm.
human moderation versus automated moderation, a key area which you know a plethora about, Serena. So, do you believe human moderators are still essential for managing those online spaces, or do you think technology can evolve to eventually replace them?
Now, I think my answer is going to be no surprise to this question. Of course, human moderation is really still essential. I mean, I'm an expert in online community moderation, including training moderators and speaking at moderation conferences, moderation policy. But I'm not saying that just because it's my opinion.
Mhm.
Because when we look at the work of moderation, a lot of it is actually about context. So there are very few black and white issues in the context of moderation. So a lot of the frameworks and things that I teach when I'm teaching moderation to people is think about the context, look for history, look for nuance, look for intent. And ultimately, it's about understanding human behavior and the context of what's going on. So I think when we're thinking about those sides of things, it's hard to see how a bot is going to be able to do that appropriately, keep up with the history of a community, keep up with the context, keep up with tone, keep up with humor. There's a lot of different navigating things you've got to navigate there. And I think humans are still needed, especially when we're making complex decisions and ideally in overseeing communication. So yeah, definitely from an oversight perspective and for the complex stuff, human moderators are essential.
Yes, and you talked about the
Mm.
kind of, nuances of things that make us human in our response to things, but how do you think platforms can balance that nuance of human judgment versus the speed of the way AI is moderating and modernizing things?
I think yeah, there's definitely a perfect partnership. I mean,
Yeah.
machine learning is a long kind of history thing. What we're talking about nowadays is generative AI, but ultimately, you need the humans involved in running and overseeing the platform. But
Hmm.
in terms of the sort of work that AI can do, I think we're looking at screening, we're looking at research, we're looking at initial triage. I think that's going to be really helpful. So these AI tools are already available, but they're going to become more readily available. And I think that's going to really help. It's going to help to limit moderators doing a lot of the legwork in kind of the research, in the early stages of potential rule breaks,
Hmm.
in flagging things that are hitting certain triggers. That side of things, I think, is where AI is going to really help. And also, I think, in terms of helping with mods who are having to single-handedly consume some of the worst content, some of which you
Yeah.
can't unsee. So actually moderation work can lead to vicarious trauma or PTSD. So I think AI can help, at least with initially screening that sort of content as well. And I
Yes.
think that's going to really help, especially large scale moderation teams.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but it's certainly got a role to play.
Yeah, and obviously,
Mm.
like we talked about those elements where you think it has a role to play, but have you seen any kind of great examples of communities or platforms that have successfully blended that tech and human moderation to keep a space positive?
Yeah, I think I'd say it's already happening. We're
Mm.
just going to hear more of it. So I think we're going to see more of the talk about human tech moderation blends, especially now AI is a business trend.
Yeah.
And it's all everybody's talking about at the moment. A couple of years ago, it was NFTs, which, like,
Yeah.
you know, spend $50,000 on a JPEG of an ape. Don't do that. So,
Yeah.
and, you know, gamification. You know, back in 2012, we were playing gamification bingo in conferences. So it's
Yeah.
AI bingo nowadays. But ultimately, I think, you know, the point I suppose to make is human machine blends have been around since a long time, and in the context of community building, since the 90s, if not before,
Mm.
because machine tools have been used in tech for a long time, including in moderation. So, for example, if you join a forum, and there's a lot of old school forum platforms still out there,
Yeah.
what ultimately is going to be happening is your email or IP is used to match against blacklists, or certain keywords are being blocked, or flags are being used to quarantine or ban for specific actions. All that stuff is happening with machines. So that's already happening, has been happening for a while. And actually, I used to use something that my predecessor called the Father Jack list, on a forum platform we were banning. Ultimately, the sweary priest from Father Ted, in case people don't know who Father Jack is, and basically we had this list in the admin section of the forum, and it was just a list of all the naughty words that you wanted the software to automatically censor with asterisks. And so
Yeah.
even in those days, and this is going back about 15 years or so, we still had that machine helping to kind of block out that sort of content. But yeah, Reddit's a perfect example of already using bots in a really great
Yeah.
way. Discourse is another platform to mention, one of my favorite community platforms. They use tech and machines and AI in a great way.
Hmm.
I think, to be honest, the bigger tech companies like Meta could learn a lot about the human tech models from smaller companies, because at the moment they're arbitrarily banning people who use the word cracker, and shutting down Facebook groups for no discernible reason. That happened, I think, in the last couple of weeks. So I've been telling my clients who use Facebook groups, please get a mailing list, because if
Yes.
Meta accidentally shut your group down, you
Yeah.
need a way to communicate with people. But yeah, there's lots of potential there.
Absolutely. And that kind of flows us on nicely to the
Mm.
human responsibility in all of this. So, Serena, how can individuals contribute to making digital spaces more empathetic?
I think ultimately there's lots of potential. There's lots of
Mm.
things we can do depending on who we are. So I'd say, if you're a digital leader, how are you embedding empathy into design? How are you prioritizing it in your strategy and your resourcing? You know, are we using service design principles? Are we thinking about accessibility? Are we taking user experience seriously? How are we building with people as well as for people? And how are
Mhm.
we considering trust and safety in policy and practice? I think trust and safety needs to make a resurgence. It's sort of been battered recently with some of the way tech platforms are behaving. But and when
Mhm.
we think about the communities, I mean, if you're a community leader or a community builder, you need to be building with empathy, you need to be moderating with empathy, and we need to be using our communities with empathy. Because I think
Mhm.
ultimately, if we prioritize understanding, then we're going to see that reflect, you know, from the rules, the content, the behavior. I think ultimately empathy is everybody's business.
Yes, and we've talked
Mm.
about, you've just mentioned the moderators and the admins, but as an everyday user of a community space, what small changes can we make to kind of counter any online toxicity?
I think there are three things.
Hmm.
Number one, curate your feed. Prioritize the good stuff and ignore everything else if you can. Number two, don't feed the trolls and don't be the trolls.
Yes.
And number three, when we communicate, we listen, we think, then we speak. So I think this is all stuff you could do in life in general, but especially do it online, because that's going to help you to be more intentional, to be more thoughtful, and to have a more positive impact.
Mhm. It's really interesting you say that actually. We had a guest come on who specializes in self-improvement to help,
Mm.
founders kind of drive their businesses. And one of his key lessons was being intentional about who you follow on your online spaces as well. So it's interesting
Mm-hmm.
how, as well as self-improvement, that has such an impact on community improvement as well by being intentional about those things you follow. Because I suppose when you feel better in yourself as well, you put out better energy into those spaces. Like you say, I think you can quite easily doom scroll and fall into a rabbit hole of ending up in
Mm-hmm.
a space where people are not being nice to each other, or like you say, you see something visually that isn't very nice or is triggering. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel it's interesting how it all sort of kind of comes full circle and
Absolutely.
overlaps. Yeah. And do you think future generations will value empathy more or less as technology evolves?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's hard to say because it depends on their experience, but I predict we're going to value empathy and human connection even more,
Hmm.
especially as the world becomes more digitally enabled, like we were saying earlier about the rise of the bots. You're going to be looking for that authentic connection because we're in the third age of social media.
Hmm.
So like I say, centralized social media, Web 2.0 is sort of dying out.
Yeah.
In this third age, we're not just seeing generative AI and crypto and vibe coding. The whole thing about dead internet theory, that it's all just going to be bots talking to each other. I think that's a false future.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is this return of decentralized social media, but it's in a new form this time. We've got more niche online spaces. We've got the cozy web is a huge trend. We've got lots of discussion going on about kindness and good news online, and that's kind of counteracting the rage bait and the clickbaits. And then from the well-being side of things, and I love getting into well-being and practicing well-being and think about research, the rise of ASMR and
Yes.
digital well-being and that renewed focus on nature and sustainability. And I think Gen Z are leading the way, and Gen Alpha. I think the next generation after that, yeah, the kids are all
Mhm.
right. I think they've
Yeah.
clocked a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. It's funny you should mention ASMR because I feel
Mm,
like it's a Marmite thing. You either love it or hate it. I'm in the love
I'm quite
section.
fond of it, to be honest. Yeah, certain people do it in certain ways.
Yes,
Yeah,
I find
it can
it
be quite fun.
so relaxing. Sometimes it's very
Mm,
funny. It only particular sounds, but it's
mm,
so interesting how that's sort of now
yeah,
become a thing as well. I guess because it kind of,
totally.
yeah, makes you almost intentionally be still and think about your thoughts. But I love the way people are creating content like that as a tool for good to help others. It's kind of like a form of
Yeah.
community service in that sense within the online space.
It is amazing. You see, like, you've seen all these nature podcasts kind of doing
Yeah.
the rounds, and someone I know, they created a kind of they call it nature postcards, and
Oh,
it's basically Radio Lento, it's called, and you can basically listen to a soundtrack of the middle of a forest or a beach at
wow.
sunset. And so it immerses you in a nature landscape. And I think for a lot of people, if you're stuck in an office or you're commuting or you're stuck like me, I'm at a desk looking at the wall at the moment, so it's that whole thing of actually kind of being able to immerse yourself in nature and amazing sounds. And I think, yeah, like I say, Calm is like $1 billion business, and Headspace. And
Mhm.
so we're in this world where well-being is prioritized. So, and that's part of like this, I suppose, anti-bot sort of culture we're seeing, this, return to humanity, return to well-being. So I
Yes.
think that's really promising ultimately.
And very
Mm.
important as well. But if you
Mm.
had to give one piece of advice to tech leaders or platform designers to kind of make those digital spaces feel more human, what would it be?
Let's put people back at the heart of what we do. So
Hmm.
let's build with humans, let's lead with humans, let's design for humans, and let's prioritize human connection. I think that's really important.
Yes. And for listeners, what's one thing that they can do to make the online world just a little bit kinder?
Do something that makes things better.
Mhm.
So, some examples: you can be kind in your comments, consider how someone else might feel, including the content creator, lift other people up, share other people's content, tell someone that what they've done is brilliant, write a supportive message, thank somebody, leave a recommendation, leave a nice review, choose to share positive news. And I think ultimately we are easily influenced as humans.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
let's model empathy, let's model integrity online, because otherwise we are going to end up with a world of toxicity, self-interest, and disconnection. And I think we're all better than that.
Yes, I think that's a lovely way to kind of wrap up our topics for today. And in true Akoni Tech Talk
Mm,
style, we have to end things, Serena, with a little bit of a this or that quick fire questions to kind of see which is
okay,
your favorite, because we always ask everyone. So I'm keen to know if you
I'm
had to
ready.
pick between Spotify or Apple, which do you prefer?
Spotify,
Yeah. And are you a
definitely.
Netflix or cinema person?
Netflix nowadays,
Hmm. And
definitely.
obviously we've talked a lot about Chat GPT and what have you, but would you prefer it over virtual reality? Which is your favorite?
I'd say at the moment, ChatGPT, but yeah,
Yeah.
VR's still, yeah, it's to come. It's not what it should be yet. Give it
Yeah.
10 years.
And are you a laptop or tablets person?
Laptop, like a keyboard,
Yeah. And are you a phone call or voice notes person?
phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
Those
unsurprising for a community person.
Yeah, I was going to say those human
Mm,
elements are coming
mm.
through. And finally, if you could bring back one piece of tech that's either now evolved or it no longer exists, what would it be and why?
Oh gosh, wowzers. Oh, do you know what? I think getting back to classic MSN Messenger. Do you remember that? Like
Yeah,
you'd be next door to your college roommate, chatting
yeah,
away. Do you want to go to dinner yet? Literally like a room away, sending people silly pictures of hot dogs. Yeah,
yeah,
MSN Messenger. I think I'd be bringing it. Just bring back simple chat. Scale it back.
yes. Oh, that's so funny. I like that, but I wouldn't like to bring back having to use the dial-up internet to kind
Oh
of
gosh, no. Oh, that
to
was
use
awkward.
it. Yeah, everyone stay
Mm,
off the phones trying to go
okay.
on
I
MSN.
can't make a call because you've been in the chat room for an hour.
Oh,
Oh gosh.
Serena, it's been
Mm,
fantastic speaking with you today. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your
mm,
tips and advice. And that brings us to the
mm.
end of this week's
Thank
episode.
you.